got a really long fuse. The problem is bitches keep on lighting it right at the end. So
Yeah,
right at the top.
right. Yeah. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Remind podcast. My name is Dr. Ashleigh Morland, and today David and I are going to be chatting again about universal laws. We are loving these conversations, and Dave and I have been super intrigued by this because we did not think that this was going to be super fun to talk about, but we have gone down rabbit holes, dude. If you have not listened to the last few episodes, this is number 3 in what we thought was going to be a 3-part series, but you know what, things happen, and now it's probably going to be 4, maybe even 5, who knows, it'll stop when it stops. If you haven't yet though, I recommend you pause and go back 2 episodes ago and actually start at the start of this series, because universal laws and how they are applied, the distortions that show up, how they are impacting every aspect of life, relationships, mental health, leadership, parenting, it will make so much sense for you. And when you can start to understand these things, everything else makes a lot more sense and gets easier. So today, Dave, we're going to start off with the law of rhythm. And I feel like we have both gotten really good at living life, honoring this law of rhythm. Because the law of rhythm is that,
rhythm.
Yes, everything flows in cycles and nothing stays the same.
Amen.
Yes. And isn't it interesting, because we, like in my work with the nervous system, consistency and certainty equals safety to the nervous system. And so people really struggle with the ebbs and flows of life because they want consistency. It feels safer for them if things are predictable, if things are certain, if things are consistent. However, the natural flows and cycles and seasons of life are going to come. So when we embrace this, what does that look like? You know, how do rhythms and cycles impact relationships? How's it impacting mental health? How's it impacting parenting? So let's go there.
100%, because I mean, everyone loves to dance, right? I mean, not everyone. Everyone loves to listen to music, and you know, music's got a rhythm to it. And for me, when you sort of talk about the law of rhythm, I picture it to, what do I love about the law of rhythm? I love the flow. I love the feeling. I love the you know, synchronicity, as in you are at one with the rhythm. What I don't like is when the rhythm changes. It's that, oh, hang on. I was in the flow with that rhythm. Why is that rhythm changing?
Yeah.
Like a song's come on. Hang on. No, I want to be in my, you know, hype stage at the moment. Don't put on a slow song. Like, okay. And then you go from a slow song and then suddenly there's this absolute banger that comes on and it's pounding and the rhythm's right up there. And you're like, whoa, hang on. I've got to adjust to this. I was just vibing to this slow bit. And
Yes. It's so true, isn't it? It can feel like whiplash.
Oh, hugely. And then when you put that into cycles and, you know, the healing journey, I, you know, monitor markets, as in crypto markets a lot. So I, very similar to the stock market when you're charting and things like that, the patterns and all of these things. You got the big, lovely green candles and the terrible red candles. So green candle go up, red candle go down. But it never goes up in a straight line.
Yeah.
It goes up and down and up. And I love an upward movement.
Yeah.
Every time it starts to come back down, I feel like I'm going backwards. However, it could be a higher load.
Yep.
Right? When it comes to, yep, you are coming down and you've hit a low, but that low is a lot higher than your previous low.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, I don't like lows at all. Oh, you know. So I've got to say the rhythm itself, have no problem with it. Boy, does it take a lot of adjusting to the change of rhythm.
Yes.
Which is highly necessary.
And you know, another hard thing about that is there's no like announcement. There's no announcement. It's like you look at the seasons of weather and you go, oh, on this date, we go from this to this.
Yeah.
the rhythm of life doesn't have a megaphone. It
No,
doesn't
and
follow a calendar. It requires us to be attuned and responsive.
well, yeah, like, and as you said, summer is followed by autumn, well, or fall. And then you've got winter, spring, and, it comes around. And interesting that you mentioned that, astrology, Ash, because normally when it comes to seasons, they're kind of moon driven, which is, these big planets that, off camera we're talking about planets and how they affect your rhythm, which surprisingly, Ash is now coming direct and not from a retrograde.
Oh, you are so funny.
For everyone listening, Ash seems
It's
to be
an off
just
joke.
silently, or maybe not silently, but just ever so creepingly coming into astrology. She's working her way just ever so slightly over this way. But yes, seasons and all of that, when you can predict it and you know what's coming, then it's sort of like great. But generally, when you're at an all-time high, what's followed by that?
Yeah.
Generally, you can kind of go, you don't want to sit in this energy, but you sort of go, there's probably a consolidation period coming.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to come back from that. And inversely, when you are absolutely nose deep in the doo-doo, and you're at the bottom of the bottom,
Yeah.
there was really only one way to go, which is up. So you can have that kind of certainty, but the emotion around those two things, well, when you're feeling good from the healing that you've done and all of those things, you want to allow the euphoria. You want to allow that feeling to be there, because that is the gift of the moment. That's the gift of the present. That's also showing you where you've come from.
Absolutely.
And also during the bottom, you don't want to be, it's very hard to see a positive, even though over time, and you will have moments of it, especially in the moment. My God, to say thank you in the moment, forget it.
Yeah.
Afterwards, and what you do to be proud of yourself on how you got through it, regardless of how you got through it, right? Be proud of yourself. You got through it.
That you got through it. Yeah, exactly. 100%.
And so, there is a level of certainty, but there's a much higher level of emotional relevance, I would say.
Oh,
with
absolutely.
all of that.
Yeah, 100%. And I, as you know, we love to apply here. So I really want to think about this law in the context of life. So in relationships, something that I see is that people, it's very easy to be happy in a relationship when you're in a season of closeness, when you're in a season of passion, when you're in a season of connection and closeness. But when you're in a season of disconnection, schedules not lining up, don't have the capacity to be, passionate or intimate, that disconnect, that out of sync rhythm can be very challenging. And it's challenging, especially for people who lack the understanding of the law of rhythm, because it's not about focusing on the problems. It's about tuning into the season that you're in and honoring the rhythm. And so I see longevity in relationship is not expecting, a relationship that is always up, that's always positive, that's always in sync, that's always, your needs are being met and you feel close and you feel connected. It's not reasonable, because you are two individuals who are co-creating through your own experiences and your own personal rhythms, the rhythm of the relationship. And so being responsive, so being attentive and being responsive and having open communication around that is really important. Parenting is much the same, whether for me, I go through seasons of having more capacity or less capacity, kind of depending on what's happening in my experience, in my body, in my life. Mental health, I know you touched on this, Dave, but emotional states rise and fall. The rhythm of healing, again, people struggle and resist this because in healing, people think that it always has to be going up. And the second that there might be a relapse, the second there might be a regression, the second a new challenge comes up, it can be really disconcerting for people. And they're going to be like, oh, I've failed, or I've done it wrong, or
I thought I'd fix this.
I thought I was over this. And that's, you know, we're operating in a spiral like this, and we can come to a different perspective of the same issue. And so the issue arising again, that rhythm of healing, it's not a relapse, it's insight. It's not regression, it's breakthrough. And so when we can actually honor the rhythm and the season that we're in, we can start to see those things as gifts taking us deeper. And I heard something once that really stuck with me, that was God wants to take you further, but first he's got to take you deeper. And it really helped me, because I can see how for me to advance, for me to go further, it requires me to go deeper into the things that I thought I had already navigated. But this time I'm doing it with a new level of conscious awareness, a new level of understanding, a new level of insight. And understanding the rhythm of even healing brings grace and compassion and patience, maybe. I don't know. Actually, another one that just entered my head then was entrepreneurship. As a business leader myself, this is probably the one that I am more likely to struggle with, because I love what I do and my natural instinct is to go and go and go. And so it's very important for me to check in and, I guess, tone down the productivity and innovation and turn up the rest cycles. To be intentional, I guess, is what I'm saying. Because if I don't be intentional about inviting in cycles of hypo-arousal, downtime, rest, that's when the innovation actually ramps up. And so rather than pushing through productivity, creating space for these natural cycles in a proactive way, rather than being reactive and going, oh, I'm so burnt out, I need to take a week off work. Or that's probably a pattern from my life that I'm still working through, still working on.
Well, I mean, I heard something on my main source of information these days, which is TikTok. And but this one was a really cool one. It's that, you know, and I associated with this or resonated quite a lot, that, you know, healing doesn't mean the wound is gone. It just means that the wound no longer triggers your response.
Then.
And so you can have levels of that healing. And so when you're working on something, you sort of start to go, well, when is it healed? Like to know it's healed, you can't see it. It's gone, or it's scarred, or it's whatever it is. But how do you tell when something's emotionally gone? Well, you start to think, well, I've processed it, and something similar has come along and it doesn't trigger me. It doesn't mean that something else isn't going to come, as you said previously, a little bit deeper.
That's right.
And it's like, oh, I feel that, but it's not like I would respond like I did in my unaware or unhealed state.
That's right. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And like you mentioned about in relationships, and when you've got people, for those not watching, that was Ash pouring a glass of water, that you've actually got the best way when you've got these cycles, and you say you've got two people either working or in relationship closely, it works really well when you're both in that sort of euphoric stage, because probably some of the greatest memories will come around when you're both really up and there's nothing sort of dragging you down. Or the other ways it can work really well is when one's really down, the other one's really up, right? So there's the one that's really up is there to help and have the compassion and have the bandwidth and have the, we're talking about fuses, right? a little bit earlier, having a longer fuse to be able to bring or have space to be able to work through the scenario.
Yeah.
Or if it's inverse, the other one's down and the other one's up. But when they're both down and there's nowhere to but to actually both acknowledge that you're down there, and to both acknowledge that you don't have capacity, and to both acknowledge that's a difficult part.
Totally.
Because at some point someone's going to go, well, if you're fighting for this relationship, you need to be up. Well, who is that? So hopefully you don't come
of
across
an episode we did on the season of young kids, because that's what I see is by far the most common time for both people in a relationship to be in that low survival state is in the period of young kids. And, you know, maybe you could amp that up a little bit with when your kid's sick or, you know, there's other stuff going on. But just by the nature of that season, that is demanding. And to be having, you just don't have the same capacity to be breathing life into intimacy and close relationship, because you've got this little person or people who literally are depending on you for their survival and who need from you. And so there's less to give in the first place. So learning about those seasons and learning how to move through those rhythms together, recognizing that this lack of closeness right now and the lack of time, the lack of intimacy, the lack of energy is actually a season, not a threat. And it's, I mean, I could go deep into this: fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, all like not enough story, not good enough, etc. What I find is that when people in relationship can process those deep underlying fears of rejection, abandonment, etc., their capacity to coexist in that full the ebb and flow when you're really in one of those down times and make it out the other side is drastically improved.
Yeah, beautiful. Because it's like it's a law of rhythm. It doesn't stop.
Yeah.
It's a vibration. It doesn't stop. It oscillates. It never stays the same. It's always changing.
That's right.
And I think, you know, when you're in the euphoric stage, that's a bit sucky because you don't want it to stop. And when you're in the down stage, when you're in the trenches, the change can't come quick enough.
Yeah.
But change and movement is always there when it comes to the law of rhythm. So,
and the perfect entry point, the perfect bridge into the next law, which is the law of perpetual transmutation of energy, is that energy is always shifting. It's constantly shifting. And
well, it can't be destroyed.
And higher vibration thoughts, emotions, actions, communication can transform lower ones. And I think this is where you really start to understand that it's not actually the circumstance that is the vibration, it's you in response to the circumstance. And so taking that example of the two people in relationship, if I am showing up with this vibration of thoughts, emotions, and actions of resentment and fear and worry and fear of rejection and all those kinds of things, well, then I'm showing up, I'm experiencing that season at the lower vibrational level. But by healing a lot of that, by doing the inner work, by actually processing those fears, by actually learning how to relate with and to my partner in those seasons, I can transmute that energy and have higher vibration thoughts, emotions, and actions, which completely transforms those lower ones. An example could be like in parenting, if you acknowledge that you are in a season of low capacity and you have the awareness of that, I can communicate to my kids, guys, I would love to snuggle you tonight. I'm feeling really overwhelmed and I actually don't think I can handle the sensory input of touch. Is it okay if I lay next to you and we just chat? Or, hey, I don't have capacity tonight. Can I hop into bed and we can make up for extra bonus snuggles in the morning? Well, that is a very different vibrational frequency of openness and honesty and safety compared to me not having awareness and yelling and going, don't touch me. No, just get into bed, And it completely transforms the atmosphere, completely transforms it in response to the exact same scenario. So I think that's, very, very powerful.
It's right. Like you get a bit like trauma. It's like the trauma is not caused necessarily from the event. It's how you processed it or did not process it or how you related to it.
Yes.
But you could have two people sitting at a park at sunset staring at the water or whatever it is. One person's completely in the moment, just enjoying all of it. And the other person's worried about, something financial or something, whatever. Now, the same financial constraint could be across the two people, but one of them sort of goes, well, how much money do I need to enjoy this moment right now as it is? Versus the other one forward projecting into that. And so it's all the same energy. Light and dark is created from the same energy. That's why we can transmute it from one to another, right? It never dies, it just changes shape. Yeah. And we have the unique ability to, change around what we feel and how we interact with these energies of others and influences and what we project out and how we can alchemize or transmute.
Yeah, it's so true.
I love that one.
Yeah, and I think the distortion of this one, like when I think about this, a lot of the time people, I guess this is the toxic positivity. Like people want to bypass you used the word light and dark. People want to bypass the dark to think that they just need to process on the light. And when we're all love and light, we're completely distorting this perpetual transmutation of energy law because I see it as transformation happens through integration. And integration means we need to actually, I don't like the word confront because it gives a big fight energy, but integration is going to happen through the processing of deep pain, through the actual metabolization of the chemicals, not through suppression. And so if we just suppress and cover up and hide all the dark, all the bad stuff, then we are in high vibe state. Well, that's completely bypassing because we still carry the energetic imprint of those low vibrational thoughts, emotions, unprocessed wounds and trauma. And so when we can actually process that deep pain, metabolize the chemicals of all those past experiences, that's when the transformation happens. And you've got to meet the pain with kindness, with gentleness, with compassion, with love to be able to transmute it because they are the higher vibrational thought patterns and emotional imprints and signatures that have the power to transform the lower ones. We don't get to do that by just pretending the bad or the lower frequency stuff doesn't exist and just go, think positive. Let's find the silver lining in everything.
All the dark is just outside of myself. I see all this dark, but it's not me. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a common thread there.
Yeah.
But it's like, the bypassing is literally just sweeping it under the rug.
That's
Eventually,
right.
You're not going to be able to walk on it, and it becomes
you're going to trip over it.
Very unstable.
Totally. Absolutely. 100%. I think that one's very, very powerful. And I see that the most liberating, I think out of all the laws, when I see a law in practical, tangible practice in healing, it's the law of perpetual transmutation of energy that gives people the most liberation and freedom. Because when we can break off hurt and find peace, when we can break off anger and find compassion, when we can break off depression and find joy, I'm not talking about pretending the things didn't happen or pretending that we don't still feel hurt by that because we're supposed to be more righteous or, logically I've forgiven them or whatever that might look like. It's actually about being really honest about what's in my body when I think about that situation, do I feel expansive and peace and, joy, or at minimum, lack of threat? Do I feel safe? Do I feel at a minimum neutral in my body, even if not yet at the levels of peace and love and joy?
Yeah.
We don't get to just intellectualize that. It's an energetic thing because it is energy. So
yeah, it has to be felt.
Yeah,
it has to move through you. And just one last thing, like, I believe in this reality, we came here with free will. And so by definition, to have free will, you have to have a choice.
Yeah.
To have a choice, you have to have a polarity between one or the other. So all of these things exist in this reality while we're grasping with the concepts of something which is in much higher frequencies that we are wanting to achieve, but not, maybe in this reality over time. But right now, what we're trying to do is anchor some of these higher things into this reality.
Yeah.
So to bypass the dark is to bypass what you're essentially here to do in this reality.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
So it's sort of like, okay, let's sort of understand that in this reality, the coin has two sides.
That's
and
right.
just because you never flip it over doesn't mean the other side doesn't exist. This is not Schrodinger's cat. The other side does exist, right?
Yeah.
And for in my opinion, the light seeks out the dark. It's always attracted to the dark, right? And so, there's all of these things. But just one other thing that I'll circle back to. You said you don't like to use the word fight because it's quite confrontational. Why not use fight? Because you're not fighting it, you're fighting yourself. You're fighting the urge to run away. You're fighting the urge to seek safety. You're fighting the urge to just lean into something which is, into the bypassing. If I can talk about it, hopefully I'll feel it without actually attracting. Like you're fighting all these urges to actually attack it, especially at the start. If you've never done it before, it's like the first time you jump out of a plane, right? With a parachute for the sake of adrenaline, not for any other reason, right? I've never done it, but I can only imagine what are you're having to fight against yourself, or someone has to push you, right? That first initial thing. Yeah, I believe you are fighting something. You're fighting for yourself to change. You're fighting through those fears. You're pushing through. It becomes easier and it becomes more gentle. But certainly at the start, it absolutely, in my experience, it felt like it.
Yeah, I can probably resonate with it feeling like it at the start, but also I see the journey towards, we're here to surrender. Surrender into faith and trust, and there's no fight in surrender. So I guess it is part of a journey and different stages of that journey.
Yeah.
For me personally, I spend my life, surrender is the hardest thing for me, and I spend my life not resisting, not fighting, because I think we did a podcast episode on what are you fighting for a long time ago. It might have even been in the teens or early 20s.
We'll have to dig it out and stick it in the show notes.
Listen to it from the lens of this. But I think that for me, my frame of reference is, yes, there's a battle, but when I embody the fact that the fight is already won, then I don't need to show up with fight energy. I need to drop into trust and faith. And so that's my kind of personal walk and journey, and going, this is not easy, because every cell of my body does want to fight. Every cell of my body does want to, but it's actually the only reason I want to fight is because I lack the faith and trust that the outcome is already taken care of. So it's, it's really, really interesting.
And I'd say that's probably a few steps down the healing journey already to be able
I agree. Absolutely.
To be able to embody that, and
absolutely
100%.
Agree. Yeah.
Because as you go down that path, if you then start to realize, if I'm fighting something, it's actually not for me, and I'm forcing something, and then therefore it's not for me. So it doesn't matter how much I fight this, it's not going to go where I want it to go.
Yeah.
So you absolutely need to surrender it. At the start of the journey, then you're trying to break patterns and programming that you're trying to get away from.
Yeah.
So I suppose if I had to visualize it in a graph, starting point of healing, and you go out, as the fight has to be its highest and then comes down as you go out, as your healing journey comes up. Or your level of surrender comes up. Because chances are at the start of a healing journey, for me, there was no surrendering. I couldn't surrender because I had everything holding me back, my nervous system, my beliefs, my everything. But the only way I could actually push through it was to break through all of that, which was all confrontation.
Yeah.
Now, completely different story.
Yeah.
However, there's that level. And again, based on where you're at. So, do we have any more we want to cover off on?
Yeah, so I want to touch on law of compensation.
Compensation. Okay.
Law of compensation is an interesting one. It says you're rewarded in proportion to the value that you offer. And where I guess the programming that distorts this one is like hustle culture. It's like if you just work harder, then you'll be rewarded. But people can work hard their whole entire lives and feel like they're never seeing the fruits of that. And so that can mean that we ignore things like privilege. We ignore things like burnout. We ignore things like our nervous system limits or capacity. But also, I guess, the report card of reward, like what are we seeing, thinking, or what evidence are we actually looking for of reward for us to think that we have been rewarded? And I often find people get this in a real transactional nature, like, well, I did this for you, so you should reward me with that. But it doesn't really work like that, because we're talking about divine service, divine value, and divine payment, which doesn't always look like money or whatever we're expecting it to be. So what I've found in my business journey, I can see this law of compensation. I feel like I've nailed this because I am very heart-centered in everything that I do. I'm very about alignment. So from a business perspective, our highest value is love. So in everything that we do, and I'm not for a second suggesting it's perfect, but our intention is there in everything that we do. Love is at the center of everything. And so I focus on true service, true alignment. We want to love our clients. We want to love each other well. Our policies and procedures are there, but there's space for love, right? It's value driven. And when I shifted away from business being this rigid policies and procedures and I guess SOPs and all that sort of stuff, not saying those things aren't important, but what I am saying is not letting rigidity dictate outcome. And when we focused on just loving people well, that's when we will receive referrals. We have loyalty. We get these unexpected opportunities because our heart is in that divine service. Our heart is in the value that we can provide humanity. And that's when doors open. That's when opportunities open that I just sit there and go, how on earth did this happen? And the reward of that can even just be seeing someone's life transform. Because of how we've showed up and loved them in that moment. And then applied to leadership in the same context of business, because love is at the center of everything that we do. It means that our culture is about loving and honoring each other. We respect each other. There's mentorship, there's deep connection, there's a level of emotional and psychological safety that our team, including me, receives. And in response to that atmosphere, that culture, that sense of belonging, that sense of receiving love, there's more love given in return. There's more dedication, there's more innovation, there's more trust, there's, loyalty. So that's the law of compensation in action. I think in parenting, things like, if we put effort and energy and time and invest our resources into really connecting with our kids, keeping an open heart, being generous with our attention, that pays off in the long term. Kids develop secure attachments. Kids develop empathy. Kids develop more true resilience rather than the toxic version of resilience. So,
and I'd say on a personal level, like a singular level, right? Because you've covered a lot when it comes to interaction with others, which is highly important. But imagine if the law of compensation didn't necessarily work on how hard you grind and how hard you hustle, like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
What if it was building up a bank account, right? Because it's not instant. It's not like, as you said, transactional. You know, you go do some healing and then cha-ching, it comes in. Especially in my life, it builds up. And it feels like it takes forever, right? And then it trickles out. So imagine it was around, how did you honor yourself today?
Yeah, absolutely.
How did you show up for somebody else, you know, based on how you came into it?
Yeah.
What were the things that, you know, how did you take something that you were absolutely fearful of doing and still did it while scared because you chose to follow your intuition?
Yeah, and that's perpetual transmutation of energy, because it's transmuting stuck energy into momentum energy.
Yep.
And by virtue of transmuting that energy through higher vibrational action, you're rewarded in proportion to the action you take.
Yeah, but it might not be instant, right?
No, of course not.
It might be this thing where the bucket has to fill up before it tips over.
Yep.
And so, but all of this, and especially my previous program, was all about, well, what do I have to show for any of this?
Yeah.
Especially why the compensation's building up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the seeds of doubt creep in.
And I guess that's what I mean by report card. Like, if we're saying you are rewarded, that's the first one, rewarded, in proportion to the value you offer. Well, first of all, what is the lens through which we are valuing value or defining value or delivering or offering value? Is it value at a worldly level? Is it value at a soul level? Like, what is that? And then what are we looking for when we look for reward? Because if it's only in the bank account, well, then we've got a distorted view of reward that is programmed through the world. But talk to anyone at the end of their life and ask them, what was the most rewarding experiences of your life? And that's when they'll say things that have nothing to do with earning boatloads of money.
Relationships.
It's relational.
But I would say my experience at the moment is taking all of these things that don't define value outside of myself.
Yeah.
Right? So we live in this reality where it'd be lovely if we didn't need anything. We didn't need to eat. We didn't need to pay for housing. We didn't need to pay for school stuff. We didn't need to drive around. We didn't need. But this is our reality, right? So I'm guessing, a boatload of people who are doing a lot of work which is internal, that don't necessarily have any validation, except for the fact that more and more people are talking about it and trying to get a baseline of value. It's sort of like, what's the value that David brings in as an unhealed version that creates policies and procedures and becomes a CEO of a big company? What's the value of that guy? A lot of people could tell you that's the value of that guy, right? Whether they like him or not, completely different, but they can point to the value. Now, someone else, the same David, who's completely healed and has a lot of, loving people around him, however, in the material world has nothing to show for it. What's the value of that guy? Right? We're still trying to learn and we're still navigating what that is. Now, that guy's still going to be...
What value and reward is. Exactly. Yeah.
And so, and when we talk about doing this inner healing, like some of the things, like you heal, right? And the law of compensation says you do this hard thing, you follow your intuition, there's compensation coming. Well, when? Like it could be instant, very rarely instant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you're feeling the depths of the emotion, the depths of the healing. Like you are purging, you are crying, you just feel isolated, you feel torn apart. And then you feel better instantly. How long does that take to integrate? It might take a little while. You might feel a little better.
Yeah.
But you might feel a little better straight away, and you might feel a little bit more better the next day and things like that.
That's right.
But does it feel equal? Does the reward or the compensation feel equal to the work put in? No, but chances are it's
not
in the
immediately.
bank.
Yeah. And I love that. I also look at it like this and go, you're rewarded in proportion to the depth you allow yourself to go, or the truth that, your freedom is relative to the truth you're willing to see about yourself before running away. And this is the law of compensation in healing, which I'm glad you touched on. If we let's say we do a lot of processing of fears and we're now free of anxiety because we've been really willing to go to the depths of processing that stuff. Well, the reward isn't necessarily, riches and stitches. The reward can be, oh my gosh, I have the capacity to accept this opportunity that a previous version of me couldn't have accepted. This would have just not even been a possibility for me. And now I get to go on a plane, or now I get to drive my kids to school. I couldn't do that before. Whatever that looks like, but that requires us to dive at the depth of healing to receive that compensation. And also another thing that just popped into my head, I was in the car with my dad yesterday and his phone rang and he answered the phone, and it was, I think it was Red Cross Blood Bank or whoever was calling. But they said, look, we've got a matched donor who needs platelets. And are you willing to do a donation of platelets for this matched donor? And he said, absolutely. And I look at that and go, wow, like I got goosebumps listening to their conversation. And Dad got off the phone and he goes, it sounds weird, but it is so rewarding and so fulfilling getting those phone calls, knowing that the fact that I have something unique that can save someone else's life is so unbelievable. And he's like, the value, you don't need to know the balance of his bank account. You don't need to know what he's done for a job for his whole life. You don't need to know who is hurt, what his history is, but his willingness to sacrifice some time and some effort, maybe a little bit of physical discomfort to go and donate to save someone's life is like amazing. That's the law of compensation. And so for him to be sitting there, now my dad's in his 60s, he's experienced lots of things, but that was so rewarding for him. And he was able to say, yeah, like it's so rewarding for me to be able to do that. And it didn't really cost him anything. And he is valuable. So it's being able to, again, redefine what feels most rewarding and why, and what's the value we're putting to it.
Awesome. Do we have any more we want to cover, or are we going to cover the others in the next episode?
Let's end this one. And we'll end this app and we'll come back.
And everyone, this is the universal law of finishing a podcast episode. So if you've enjoyed it, let us know in the comments. If you have some other thoughts about it, let us know in the comments. Costs you nothing to hit the subscribe and the like button. And until next week, we will see you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.